If you can make something that gets in front of 20 million people, you can make a multi-billion-dollar startup. Who are those people? Software developers. And how do you do it? Amazing developer experience. Today's a masterclass on exactly how to do that. Let's get started. This week, I'm here with Sylvain Utard, VP of Engineering of Algolia. Algolia is one of my favorite companies because it is absolutely the best experience I've ever seen in terms of developer onboarding.
Algolia, we're doing search as a service. So at the core, it's a REST API, but what we do is really more than just providing an API. We are providing everyone with what they need to build search inside their website or mobile application, of course.
Every developer-centric startup that I ever run across, I just tell them, go look at algolia.com's docs. It's always a magic moment when someone sees it for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And it's fully fasted, so I can easily browse, and the first thing you'll notice is how fast it actually is. This is actually real-time search, so I can type iPhone, I can even type the wrong thing, and out of box, all of these things just sort of work by default. And not only that, you can search by facet, and these facets actually continue to change as you enter other text.
And it's true that people expect, a fast search experience. And when they're using Google, it's definitely the best example. Like, you start typing and already the results are there.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure that everyone was able to implement this fast search experience on their website. The thing I keep saying is that, we have a few apps that are really leading the way on what is a great search, but those are like Facebook, Amazon, Google, and those companies are able to put like hundreds of developers behind search. We want to help any company out there to bridge that gap and make sure that they are also able to build this search experience with a smaller team.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's magical for me as a single developer. When I was working on the social network at Y Combinator, I was called, cheekily enough, Bookface. I felt like I could build basically world-class search with just a few API calls. It was really magical for me. It was Rails, and just drop in a few lines of code into my models, and then magically on the front end, I could just call upon the full power of Algolia, like faceted search. I could even do access control, which is actually one thing that is really hard to get right. And so I've always been really thankful for that. And then at the startups that I worked at previously, I worked on full text search using Lucene, customizing it from scratch. And there you have an insane problem because out of the box it doesn't work. You have to tweak 1,000 settings. And then after you deploy it, you have a giant DevOps headache, mainly around indexing and re-indexing. So when I tried you for the first time, it was magic. So to start, I think it would be really cool to walk through the things that I think are amazing about Algolia's website and first-time experience, especially the documentation.
At the center of our homepage, we really wanted to make sure that everyone understood that search is just way more than the search bar, and it's really what will drive a ton of your business.
Oh yeah. What's interesting is now the homepage has actually evolved from something that was entirely SaaS, but this is something that we see with SaaS companies that now are very driven by enterprise sales. Today you see request a demo, but for years years ago the homepage looked different.
Yes. The truth is, even if our customers today are definitely bigger than they used to be before, at the end of the day, they are still, developers, and our audience is still really about developers. And we also want, as far as making sure that as you scroll the website and as you understand what Algolia is, you quickly get the grasp of, okay, how do I actually implement search on my website or my app?
And if you scroll just a little bit, you have something that's, very active and interactive around every runtime.
We know that everyone has a different stack, everyone has or is used to a different language. We wanted to make sure that whatever your programming language, whatever your stack, you have, this Algolia experience that was outstanding. For a long time, search has been a really back-end topic, and so you were dealing with your back-end engineers, and you were asking them to build search, and at the end of the day, search is probably the most front-end feature ever. And I've been working in the search industry for the past 12 years. Even if search is kind of customized for every single app or website, at the end of the day, it's still a search bar, search results, some refinements on the side. We definitely wanted to make sure that we package all this logic so that everyone out there doesn't need to think about it anymore.
The search problem is really both back-end and front-end.
Yes.
I mean, it's really that simple. I literally included this module and then specified the specific attributes on every model that I wanted to store. Yes. Suddenly on the front end, when I was using React, it was extra simple. I could just use these sort of components that you had already created. But I also had the full power of JavaScript if I wanted.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you want to see as a developer what it takes to implement Algolia. And therefore, we have been building this tutorial that is interactive. First, we ask you to select your use case, because we definitely have a ton of customers that are e-commerce, but you can be a SaaS application, you can be a media application, you can be a travel application. At the end of the day, you need search. So let's say we are a SaaS company, we are dealing with those objects. They are probably stored in a database today. What we will ask our customers to do is, let's start by sending us the data. And again, let's say, I've been building this using Ruby, so my backend code will probably look like this.
And so this is really impressive, because the demo not only works for a RESTful API, but you've actually done versions of it for a good number of the runtimes you support.
You wanted to make sure that whatever the stack, you were able to figure out, okay, but in my stack, in my language, what does it take?
That will short-circuit that decision-making process all the way to, they support my language, I need to use this.
Yes. I initialize my API client, I get the data from somewhere, and I just push it to Algolia.
Easy.
Once you run that, it's already searchable, and you can definitely play with the search from the Algolia dashboard. But as you might have understood, we haven't been configuring the relevance yet. So Algolia by default will just search across all your attributes, which from time to time doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
So of course you want to go a step further and start configuring how to search your data. A match in name is more important than a match in owner and so on. How do you figure out which object should shrink up first? And so if I'm searching for Garry and there are two Garys in the data set, I probably want to have the one that have, the highest amount first, for instance, here. We wanted to make also...
This is so smart, by the way. This is actually matches the business case so well.
And it's very easy to understand, and this is really at the core of what we have been designing first, is we wanted to make sure that ranking and relevance was really easy to understand.
I really like that you can just easily click run code and the results just come in right away. And you can see how the properties that you change in the configuration have a very direct result.
And before, this object was coming first because we didn't configure any relevance. And now this one is coming first because it actually has, this big amount attributes.
Awesome.
No, you need to build the UI.
This is a whole sandbox.
Yeah. You just have to uncomment a few blocks in order to update in real time what's actually happening on the front page. This is using the vanilla JavaScript instant search library, but we also have a flavor for React, Vue.js, Angular. But it's really as easy as this, making a few widgets work together, defining a search bar, defining some stats that you would have here to provide more understanding of how many results you have, and literally, adding some faceting purposes to make sure people are able to drill down their data sets.
Boom! Now it's time to sign up and use it. create your account. And I love the simple command language that you have to have in any given flow is really straightforward. And this is even just a subtle design point that I think most people should really pay attention to. I learned this trick in design from one of my first design mentors. You can actually tell what the designer wants you to do just off of contrast. And so there's this test called the squint test. You can squint, and whatever you can sort of make out the most, it's usually the highest contrast and largest thing. That's the thing that you should always be driving the user to. It's an opinionated approach, but actually every company and every product and service needs to use that. Without that, users get lost.
Sure.
So now jumping back into the UI, being able to see the sample directly in the UI is just something so powerful as well. You know, just being able to change this live. I love that the docs that you've created have so many opportunities to see the power of the actual platform. And overall, when I work with a lot of startups that work with developers, that's almost the most important thing from their homepage and from their developer docs, that in the first sort of minute or two of interacting with documentation, can I see the power of it? You know, I'm sort of testing out a new kind of hammer, and after I see it and understand it, I want to feel powerful. And that's sort of the number one goal of
and this
stuff.
is why we really wanted to make our docs as interactive as possible, and so having those live examples within the documentation. And again, you pick the flavor that you prefer, but then every single widget you can interact with, you can understand how they work, and you can actually jump on the actual documentation and better understand, okay, this is the React component, those are all the props that you can use. And either you go for more live examples or more code examples.
I'm wondering, implementation detail, how much of this is your custom code, and then someone looking at this, if they want to be able to do this, how much of this is homegrown and how much of this is services that you've used or open source you've used?
Since day one, we wanted to make sure that we provide the best developer experience, and therefore we have been trying a bunch of different tools to build documentation, but none of those tools were reaching our expectation in terms of making it interactive. And so what we decided to do is having an actual engineering team behind these docs, and having them build a documentation website like you would build an app. So it's really their own product. They have a roadmap, they have features. It's really considering the docs as another product.
That's a big investment, but for something that sells to developers, it sounds like it's table stakes these days. Sounds like, if you can't devote a team to it, then actually Middleman or Gatsby are pretty good options for the static content.
Sure. But then on top of that, there are the programming languages. And there, what we have been building is really all those languages. And this wasn't super easy. At Algolia, we have 100 engineers, and 15 of them are working on those tools. On the docs, on the API clients, on the instant search front-end libraries. It's definitely a significant investment, but I think this is what was really required for us to have the developer trust and have them use our libraries and our API with ease.
That was one thing that really stood out to me, having used at least a few of the different runtimes. You were able to hire people who wouldn't just make a Java version API for Rails. You were able to find people who could make the idiomatic version just like a true Rubyist or a true Rails person would write or use that.
And I will be honest, it wasn't the case at the very, very first day. And I'm a Ruby guy, I've been building the Python version first. But if you're not a Python expert and you are applying the same conventions and naming rules of Ruby in Python, you get it wrong. Mm-hmm. So indeed, what we have been doing over the past few years is making sure that either we have the experts of this language or this stack, this framework to implement these libraries, or we're actually partnering very closely with people that are able to help us figure out, okay, what does it mean in JavaScript or in Java or in C#.
One of the things that's always a challenge for honestly any startup is how do you get both low bar, which we've talked through. Actually, we spent a lot of time today talking about how do you get a low bar so that any developer can hit the homepage and understand what it is and then feel powerful.
So one thing that I've been saying to the engineering team since day one is we want to target any kind of developers. So if you are outside of a boot camp, or if you have been programming for the past 15 years, we need you to be able to implement Algolia. And so it's really about making it simple without being a toy.
The examples that you show actually call to mind going to Stack Overflow and being able to see code samples and being able to use them directly out of that. So being able to bring the bar all the way down to maybe not even the 20 million, but even there's sort of a even larger audience of people who are just learning.
Yes, and we're definitely speaking more and more about builders rather than programmers, because honestly, even if you don't program a ton, you can build a decent search interface by copy-pasting our docs.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's nearly no code.
It's nearly no code. What was tricky, however, is to make sure we find the right balance between copy-pasting a snippet and still making it customizable and extendable. And so this is where it starts to be a little bit more tough for the engineers building those tools, because they need to keep in mind this whole spectrum of, okay, I need it to be very easy to use.
Very low bar.
If you have an advanced use case, or if you want it to be really fitting your design or whatever you have on your website, on your app.
And that's sort of the matched pair to low bar, which is high ceiling. Yeah. The holy grail for basically any product or service is an incredibly low bar and then a very, very high ceiling where customers can basically do whatever they need to do without ever having to go rebuild it themselves.
Sure.
Dude, one of the things I really like to ask for people who are in very senior roles at really some of the best startups is how did you get started in tech? Walk me through getting into computers and your path to here to be a VP of engineering.
Sure. So I've been always, playing with web technologies and having a few different websites. I've been building games while I was still at school. But for my internship, my first internship, I really wanted to go to, a company which was doing some hardcore tech.
Oh yeah.
And so I was considering databases, I was considering the gaming industry, I was considering all of those sectors where you really need to focus on performance and low level. Turns out I joined a search company called Exalid, that was back in 2008. And at that time I was part of a team building all the natural language processing pipeline. And I met a guy which is our current CTO and co-founder. A few years later,
This was Julian?
Yes, this was Julian. And a few years later, when Julian came back to me and was telling me that he was starting this company and they were building search as a service, I was like, okay, this is definitely the opportunity of a life. I need to go there. So I knew already Julien, I knew already our CEO as well, Nicolas, who has always also been part of this company. And so in the past 12 years, I've been doing search. It's an intense industry. No one today should really rebuild a search engine. It's really it doesn't make sense. But those two guys were crazy enough to rebuild the technology that was totally different than what you have been using before, which was Lucene-based or Sphinx-based mostly.
Oh yeah, I used both Lucene and Sphinx, and so much downtime and so many configuration headaches.
Sure, and those technologies have been built back in the 80s and the 90s, so the focus was different, and what relevancy was meaning was different. They were designed to search, PDFs and text and academics. Today, we have been designing Algolia to search objects. It could be a user profile, it can be an e-commerce product. And those objects have a structure. They have attributes, they have ranking information. All of that we wanted to bake in our ranking formula to make search really different.
That's the crazy thing that I was thinking about the other day, is that Algolia is a little bit like a domain-specific language, only you support how many languages? 9 languages?
Yes.
So it's actually a DSL. It's a DSL that makes people super powerful, and it works with 9 languages, not just, and it's not a, not just one. That also sounds like really great advice for people who are starting out in their careers. I get questions all the time from people who are, 1 year out of school or out of a boot camp, and they always wonder, how do I get ahead in tech companies? And that sounds like one very direct way, which is become excellent at something that you're really, really interested in, and opportunities will really come to you.
And be passionate about it. I think this has been, driving my whole career. Is I really like doing what I do. I started building the search engine. I'm now leading an engineering team. I'm not coding that much anymore, but just being able to lead the team that is behind this is really fulfilling.
So Algolia is hiring.
Of course, like all startups who are hiring. The engineering and product team are mostly based in Paris, in France, where we all started. But we have an office in San Francisco. We have a few other offices in London, Atlanta, New York, and more recently Tokyo.
Are you guys partially remote, or is it almost entirely remote dev team?
So we started by having almost no one remote, but in the past few years, I think we all understood that you cannot do without, and therefore we have more and more remote opportunities. What is key, however, is that we wouldn't split a project across too many time zones.
That makes sense. So try to keep it by time zone.
Yeah.
And so you're hiring both remote and on-site roles. Check out algolia.com/jobs. Sylvain, thank you so much for spending time with me. This is really awesome.